Hello, this is Robert Faust, founder of BIOAG, Faust BIOAG Agricultural Services, Inc., with our brand name is BIOAG. And yesterday I was at the organic hazelnut growers field day, where we went to Carter Clark's hazelnut farm in the Willamette Valley. And there was about 100 growers there. And we went back to Albany to processor Cascade Foods, and we had a series of presentations that were very good. And I had a few minutes to speak, and I would like to add some more to that. I can do a little YouTube presentation right now to follow up a little bit on what my comments at the meeting about decline in hazelnuts and tree crops in general, and what the yield limiting factors are based on my research, many years of research and data and new developments, and the solutions that I've come up with for those yield limiting factors and to prevent decline, and also the problem of heat stress, drought, which is definitely a problem. I'm just coming in from working on my farm, and I'm hot, and we've had record heat, a lot of fires and a lot of smoke, and drought. So this is not going to be over anytime soon. Now, there are definitely ways, there are methods, and there are products that can help alleviate drought. And some we just learned about how they actually work. Of course, one of those is fulvic acid, and the other one is acetic acid. But our product, Full Power, fulvic acid has been known, well, for 20 or 30 years, fulvic acid is known to be a drought and frost remediation product. So, in other words, it'll help reduce frost damage, resist light frosts, and also definitely drought stress. So it keeps the plant from desiccating as much. We didn't know how that worked. Okay, also we now know that there's other things that do that on a molecular basis. They switch on some mechanism within the cell that helps the plant resist the heat and the drought stress and things like that. So there are answers, but the first step is dealing with the potential for decline and also resistance to diseases and insects. How do we do that? And what is the optimum program? Of course, now we have sap analysis, and that helps, and that was discussed at the meeting. So at least you know where you are. We used to use leaf analysis, petiole analysis, soil analysis, and all those things help. And now we have the sap analysis. It shows you what the uptake really is. What are you missing? And they have better, as it was mentioned by a crop advisor from Oregon State University, they're trying to update the standards for the nutrient optimization, which were a little on the not correct side, the old standards that were developed in the 70s. We know a lot more now than we do in the 70s. For instance, they had a very high number on nitrogen. Well, we also know that too much nitrogen can actually reduce yield in nut crops. It's good to use a fair amount of nitrogen in the development stage, the vegetative stage. When you plant a tree, you want it to grow fast. But then yield can actually be reduced in a mature tree by too much nitrogen, because it shifts it into a vegetative cycle, which we don't want. We don't want leaves. We don't sell leaves. We sell the nuts. So that's the important thing. And if you want to know more, I'm going to do more and more of these, and just subscribe. Hit subscribe and notify. Hit the bell or notification. And please subscribe, because then you'll know when I release new YouTubes on these various subjects: organic, biological, biodynamic, maximum economic yield, and yield limiting factors in crops. Also, pest management. That's how I started out, but I realized that it's better for learn how plants resist pests and insects, and that's nutrition. That's the broad category would be nutrition. So what is nutrition? It's more than NPK. Okay, like I said at the meeting, because I didn't have much time, that I worked on declines in macadamia nuts, and in one of the biggest macadamia nut orchards in the world. It was 3,800 acres. Mac Farms of Hawaii, now owned by Blue Diamond. Before it was an Australian company. And my job was to determine how to grow these things organically so they could be certified organic. This was back in the 90s, so a while back. You'll see from the pictures I put up, I look a bit younger then. So that the other part of what they wanted to do, they wanted to go organic, but they also had decline. So what's wrong with these trees? They're not producing. You've got a lot of dead twigs and branches, and they're not looking good. They're kind of yellowish, whitish. They're not. There's problems, and we don't know what they are. And of course, this is my job, and I've worked on many crops where people, what is it? What's going on? As a plant pathologist and IPM specialist, entomologist, people come to me, when something's sick. But it's better. Prevention is a better approach than trying to cure a sick tree. But you can. I just bought an old farm here, and it wasn't producing anything. It has pears, apples, cherries. And we went and pruned well. That's important, knowing how to prune. Prune it good, prune it hard. And then apply the humic substances, humic acids, and make sure that the silica levels, that's definitely a remediation step for an old orchard. And prevention. Silica provides an armor plating on the leaves. It prevents insects and fungi damage, and it also resists desiccation loss. So the work I did in Florida with Dr. Matachenkov and in Hawaii, where we determined by extensive research, and in case of the Florida citrus industry, paid over $1 million worth of research to come up with the Dr. Matachenkov, who's the head of the International Silica Society and a world-class agronomist and crop physiologist. What was wrong with citrus? How come they were getting decline and death of the trees and reduced yields and quality and all that? And I was doing the same thing with the macadamia and other crops in Hawaii, other tree crops, including citrus. And actually, I had a small farm in Hawaii where I had macadamia, I had citrus, I had cherimoya, I had bananas, I had coffee, avocados. So I had the chance of working with just about every crop that's an important crop in the tropics, the subtropics. Before that, I lived in Fallbrook, California, and I worked with avocados and avocado root rot, avocado decline, and I also had an orchard of avocados and limes. So I'm a field person, and I've always had farms. I buy farms. I regenerate those farms. I bring the plants back to life. I've always liked to do that. I go buy sick plants in the garden stores and apply my materials, humic substances, what we now call biostimulants, and they come out of it and be beautiful, So I've done that for like 50 some years. So let's talk about the filberts or hazelnuts, okay? Well, pretty much nut crops, and most tree crops have pretty much the same issues, and they go into decline. And why is that? They're getting old. No, there's a reason. And frequently it's root problems. You get root disease, you might get nematodes, it breaks open the tissue. You get a fungi gets in there, it goes up the vascular system, and you can see a brown stain in the cambium or the vascular system of a plant, a tree, whatever. So it's really got this fungus feeding on it from the inside. And the plant just doesn't have what it takes to resist that. Now we know from molecular genetics that plants have their own protective systems that are activated in the cell. We didn't know that before. Plants can produce their own plant growth stimulants. We call plant growth stimulants. You don't have to apply some artificial hormones because the plant will do it itself. And also it will protect itself against drought, frost, insects, diseases. There's a specific genetic molecular pathway that turns on resistance to pathogens and and stress diseases. We now know it. It's a new science, molecular genetics. We know what pathway. And we know what pathway is the fulvic acid, which is our full power product. Fulvic acid, it's the only product that's got the real guarantee based on AFCO, based on Human Product Trade Association test method, which is accepted here in Oregon for registration. And the product full power is guaranteed fulvic acid content. The new test method is hydrophobic fulvic acid. And that's a technical term that has to do with the bioactive component of fulvic acid. Fulvic acid has 5 different fractions in it. And it's a very broad term. It's really the fraction. It's really a fraction of humic substances. It's not an individual chemical compound. Within humic acids is broad. And now with new technologies, like the Fourier transform spectrophotometers and all this high-tech techniques where we break down the functional groups and their organic species of carbon. You know, you've heard of them, polyphenols. We know that they're antioxidants, quinones, carboxyl groups. This is organic chemistry. It's organic biochemistry. It's complicated. When I went to college, we didn't have molecular genetics yet. That wasn't a thing. So I'm learning too. But there's 800 different compounds, chemical specific compounds in humic acid. Some of them do good things, some of them do bad things. So you have to know what percentage is the good stuff versus what percentage is the bad stuff. And then you get a biological activity index, like 86%, 90%. So you're subtracting the negative functional groups, which are like the methylene groups, which are associated with petrochemicals, oil, coal, etc. And they contain sulfur, and they can be negative to plant growth. So when we add up the good stuff, the carboxylics and quinones, and the polyphenols and all that, and then subtract the methylene groups, then you have an idea of the bioactivity index of the product. Ours is very high because we understand this. And then we have our own laboratory, and we do testing and quality control, and that we have to because we have a guaranteed analysis that's regulated by the state. Eventually, in a year or two or a few years, it'll be under the biostimulant laws, regulations of the EPA. And then it'll be just one federal registration, just like we have in Canada. In the U.S., we don't really have the right niche yet. They're working on that. It's the biostimulants. So we have to register in each state. And each state can be different. Like Oregon's different than California. Oregon accepts fulvic acid registration. California doesn't. So in California, we have to call it humic acid, which, of course, fulvic acid is one of the humic acids. Okay. There's humic, fulvic, ulvic, olmic, and there's human, which is the insoluble. It's very complex. It's considered the most complex substance on Earth, and it is defined by fractions. So the fulvic is the acid-soluble fraction. Keep that in mind. So if it's not golden, fulvic means gold, brass, color in Latin, and acid, well, it's acid. It means it's got a low pH. So if it's not gold color, yellow gold, that's crucial because one of the main activators of these pathways that give resistance to plants are tannins, and tannins have that color in fulvic acid matrix. Okay, so that's crucial because that's what makes it work, at least on the plant resistance part. But since there's dozens of compounds within the fulvic acid, it does a lot of different things. People say, well, how can that one thing do all that, one chemical, fulvic acid? Because it's not. It's the acid-soluble fraction of humic substances. There's hundreds of chemicals in there. And they do different things. That's why fulvic acid does a whole lot of different stuff. Okay? So back to crop limiting factors in decline. So let's look at macadamia, filberts, hazelnut, same thing, citrus, whatever, it doesn't matter. The research showed the main limiting factors for a given crop, like citrus, nuts, whatever, is activated humic compounds and monosilicic acid. So the plant has to have the ability and the supply of a soluble silica to take that up, and it turns into, it's moved up and metabolized and used to coat the leaves. So if you have plants that don't have a shiny leaf and they're dull in color, they're not getting enough silica. Silica makes the leaf shine. It protects it. It reflects, I feel like it reflects the signal of the detection mechanism of insects. Their antennas are working. They don't see like you and me. They're detecting like frequencies and all kinds of spectrums and things that they use to target their food source, right? So if you have a shiny surface, which is actually the mineral called opal, it is what it is, the leaf surface is protected. Fungal spores can't germinate and enter the cell and infect the plant. Insects have problems because it's a mineral opal, so they're tearing up their mouth parts so they give up. Okay, so it's protective. It also helps resist drying, desiccation, and that reflective, in other words, it reflects like heat, like infrared, but yet it allows the ultraviolet to come through, and that's what causes activates the chlorophyll and produces the energy, the sugars that a plant produces. So plant food is not NPK salt fertilizer. It's sunlight. It's changing sunlight, which is a frequency. It's an energy with a lot of different spectrums. Ultraviolet, with the help of chlorophyll, produces energy. And that's plant food. That's produces carbohydrates, sugars. And that's how the plant operates. And then we eat that plant, that's how we operate. So it's not NPK, no. But the plant needs mineral nutrients. It needs the silica. So let's back to the story. So what did all this research show? It showed that the limiting factor is activated humic compounds, not just any humic compounds, not just organic matter, but activated. That means oxidized. That means it's farther down decomposition and it's got a higher fulvic acid content. This fulvic acid takes a long time. You can make it yourself, biodynamic compost, let it age for a year or two, and you're going to have it. And that's why biodynamics works. And they didn't know why, and it was denigrated, but the results were there clearly. And now we know why. You're talking about very small amounts necessary for the plant. So activated humic compounds and monosilicic acid, they're the main limiting factors. And then the other things are trace elements. You'll see severe zinc deficiency. You can see it in the leaf. It'll have a scimitar shape. Colors are off, and manganese deficiency. Be a cupping effect. I saw some of that yesterday. It's not necessarily manganese deficiency, but I'd know if I took a leaf analysis. And the leaf will tell you, the plant will tell you what's wrong if you know how to read it. The plant will tell you, it does take a bit of experience, but I can basically tell by looking at leaves in the plant what's going on, because I've looked at tens of thousands of them. So the trace elements are crucial, and not just shotgun. It has to be a specific balance of the specific trace elements. And that's why I invented the product TM7, which was the trace elements blended and actually activated reacted with humic substances. So that it's the chelation effect. If you just put ions of zinc, manganese, copper, boron in water in a spray tank, they start to combine. And then you have a form that's not available, or it's not able to get into the cell wall, get through the cell membrane. So that's a problem. So when you chelate it with the humic substances, and it's in the right proportion, because too much of one thing can tie up another thing, and so we have the TM7 is exactly the right proportions. Iron, cobalt, molybdenum, not usually even in a foliar spray, crucial to the microbes. Iron, cobalt, molybdenum is required for nitrogen fixation and the activity of soil microbes. And we have bacteria within the vascular system of the trees and the plants, and they help feed by going outside of the root hairs and making nutrients available. It's amazing. And then the amino acids. So instead of urea, we would use nitrogen amino. Now, the other thing, in areas that have a lot of heavy rainfall and they don't have a calcareous soil, they may have like here, a water deposited, very good soil. And initially, it was incredible because there's forests growing on it for thousands and thousands of years. So it built up a lot of humic substances, and it was a real dark soil. Now it's light, very white. Because they oxidize organic matter. Organic matter doesn't last, it oxidizes. You have to keep replenishing. And that's the whole idea of organic, which came from the biodynamic. Remember, biodynamic came first. And then they got into the idea, like Rodale, of organic. Well, it's really biodynamic. Biodynamic compost, the work of Steiner, who was a genius, and he was the one who got the idea and gave the lectures in Basel, Switzerland, back in the early 1900s on biodynamic. And actually today, Switzerland and Germany are the leaders in biodynamics. It works. It's been proven. There's scientific data from years and years of research and comparison against conventional. It works. Okay, it works because of humic substances and microbial activity. And so that's what we do. Our products are modern, let's say, biodynamic preparations. So instead of putting 9 to 12 tons of compost on per acre, 10 to 50 pounds of full humic, which is a soluble activated humic substances, or our foliar applications of full humic or full power. So that's the limiting factors. And so we can turn around an old orchard or regenerate plants by applying the humic substances combined with the trace elements. And if we're starting from scratch, we're going to use a mycorrhizal fungi. Our product is called VAM. It contains 7 different mycorrhizal cultures, pure cultures, that are mixed, blended, so that, because we don't know which one's going to work under which conditions. So you have 7 different strains, and 1 or 2 of those strains is going to take off in whatever climatic soil zone you have. Everything from a desert, we have one called deserticola in there, and then other ones that are more adaptable to more humid conditions. Now, they protect the root. They release enzymes that release phosphate to the plant, and that helps the plant grow. The plant releases carbohydrates through the root system, and that helps the mycorrhizal fungi grow. And it keeps those root rot organisms out. And it also stimulates root growth. So a rapidly growing root resists these diseases. It's crucial. So we need to either reapply, and the mycorrhizal fungi, which can be done in an older declining orchard. But ideally, we're going to inoculate the trees that we plant with the mycorrhizal fungi we call VAM, which also has the trace elements and the humic substances in the preparation. So when you make a liquid, dip the root, plant in there, and plant it, you're going to have a good start because you're going to have everything it needs. And then with the other thing is calcium. So in soils that are very acidic, like here in the Willamette Valley and a lot of places where you have fairly high rainfall, although this year we have a drought, the soil is acidic. So we have to keep liming. And even then, and even in soils that are calcareous, that may have a pH of 8, that's a whole other problem. And I'm not talking about that today, but even in those soils, calcareous soil, the plant has a problem with calcium. And calcium is the queen of nutrients. So it's important for the sugars and the sweetness, the quality of fruit. It's absolutely crucial. It's like maybe number 2 on the list of crucial elements that a plant needs. Calcium's so important. It's so important to us. So we have a calamino, which is a calcium product that is chelated with amino acids. So that's applied with a fulvic acid product, which helps make the cell membrane more permeable. And then the amino acid chelate can be transported into the tissue. And we proved that this year. We're using sap analysis, and we show massive increases in the calcium in the plant sap, and that's what you want. And we did that with foliar applications of calamino and full power at Carter Clark's orchard and in the Willamette Valley. And so that was monitoring it with sap analysis, so we know. So basically, that's just a quick rundown on what it takes to grow hazelnuts or any nuts or most fruits, and how to turn things around and prevent the problems. And also provides the drought protection and frost protection. But right now we need drought protection. We need to reduce the stress, abiotic stresses. It's bad. I mean, we have record heat, record drought, all at the same time. And now we have these new pests and they mentioned them, and it's the brown marblinated stink bug, or BMSB, brown marmorated stink bug, really bad, okay? Again, a silica can protect and help. It's not the total answer. This is an introduced pest. So they've released beneficials that control them normally. So eventually they'll catch up. It's actually called a samurai wasp. But yeah, so eventually they build up a population, and these things are no longer a big problem. So that's something we can talk about next time. So like I say, subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I'm going to keep these instructional YouTubes coming, because I know it's necessary. People are not getting the right information. This is, to me and to many scientists in my field, we know, but these individual scientists are very specialized And so a lot of this doesn't get translated into a practice or a product or a solution. That's what I do. I take all the research, the data, and I gather my own research, and I have my own farms, and I work with clients, and we figure out how to make, in the field, how to solve a problem. I've been a problem solver for well over 50 years. And I find that, yeah, the information's there, it's just not integrated into a practical solution on the farm, because these researchers and scientists, they're not necessarily farmers. They don't really get that side of it. Well, I'm a scientist and a farmer, and I look and I read the data, and I come up with something, and I use the scientific method to determine whether it's going to solve the problem. And that takes research and experimentation. And that's what we do. And what I'm telling you is been through the scientific process, the steps that we go to determine as well as we can. And you realize science is always changing, and it's adaptable. It's not orthodoxy. It's not a book of rules. It changes as we get new knowledge and new tools. So, like, I was glad to hear a university extension person yesterday admit that the standards were wrong, and they're developing new leaf standards for nutrients in the hazelnuts. Yeah. So you challenge the old school with new information, and that's how science goes. It's not like orthodoxy, like religion, where, okay, set in stone. No. And so my job is to break that stone. So we have to move ahead. We have to use new knowledge and apply it. Knowledge without application is just sort of academic. A few people read the paper that's published. I read them, and I turn them into something. I use millions of dollars worth of research that I get for essentially free, and then I translate that into something that'll help the farmers. And it doesn't seem that difficult to me, really. But what seems difficult is to get the point across to where people are actually benefiting from that knowledge. So that's why I'm trying to make this series of YouTubes, because we always seem to get great results. It's just, how do you get that word out to more people so more growers can benefit? And so now we have a move towards organic. Well, yeah. I mean, I know how it's done. I was an organic inspector for 25 or 30 years. I've seen thousands of farms. I know what works. I know what doesn't. I know what it takes to be a good farmer. I know what the problems are. I know how to solve them. So just stay tuned, and I'm going to release a lot of this information. So I'd be glad to have comments, and people can contact me for specific information, and by leaving a comment or what they might be interested in, or if they think I'm wrong, tell me why, or if you got something better, share it. Okay, so this is Robert Faust in McMinnville, Oregon, in the Willamette Valley of Northwest Oregon, in a drought and a heat wave, signing out.